When I entered my PhD and began studying sudden cardiac arrest, I realised that it was actually much more common than I had appreciated as a trainee. And that's because, unfortunately, about 8 in 10 people don't even survive to the hospital.
We'd just come back from Ireland and Bryan was sick. The GP over there told him that he was okay, nothing to worry about. Bryan went for a ride. His heart rate monitor read really high, over 200, but we just thought it was a heart rate monitor and ignored it. That evening, his eyes were a bit yellow and he didn't feel great. But because he'd just been to the GP and we'd just come back from Ireland and we just thought that he was tired. Bryan went to work the next day and then he called for Aves and I to come and collect him. And then about 4 o'clock in the morning, I got up and Bryan reached out to me and said, "I love you." And I reached out and said, "I love you too," and gave him a kiss on the forehead. And he seemed normal, he seemed fine. I brought Aves out into the bedroom. And as I was feeding Avie, I heard a noise. And I called out, and there was no answer. When I finished feeding Avie, I went into the room, and he was in the bed, and his hands were up over his head at a strange angle. I got into bed, and I cuddled in beside Bryan. And I tried to nudge him, and he didn't respond. And then I realised that something was wrong. Bryan wasn't moving, and his lips were slightly blue. I called an ambulance. They talked me through getting him out of the bed and performing CPR. The ambulance crew came in and they tried to resuscitate Bryan, but not a shockable rhythm. So it was too late.
At the moment, 90% of people who have a sudden cardiac arrest die. And so if we can make inroads on that statistic, and we need to, that's going to have huge outcomes for Australia, both in terms of families staying together and even just things like the economic impact of having those extra Australians here in our country. We have a lot of people in our registry who are young, fit and healthy and didn't have traditional cardiovascular risk factors but did have symptoms they ignored because they didn't think they could have heart disease. But heart disease is so much more than just blocked arteries and having high cholesterol. There's a whole range of electrical problems or heart muscle problems and genetic problems that can exist. So if you have symptoms, please get them investigated.
We now know that it's likely that Bryan had Brugada, and a simple ECG at the right time could have saved Bryan's life.
I think knowledge is power, and when something like a sudden cardiac arrest happens in a family, it's absolutely tragic and devastating. So through our research, we help to identify people who are also at risk in the family to try and be able to answer the questions of why has this arrest happened and to ensure that nobody else is at unrecognised risk.
Since Aves and Jack have been babies, they've gone to a cardiologist in Royal Children's Hospital. A suspicion of Brugada was raised with Jack, and we got an ECG, and Jack has Brugada. That means that he's at an increased risk of a cardiac arrest. Jack's school is aware. Jack's friends and family are aware. So that if something does happen, we can respond straight away.
I'm really grateful for the Vanguard grant. It's going to allow me to accelerate my research and take it to the next level. What we've already done is build a world-first registry here in Victoria that links ambulance, hospital and forensic data to provide high-quality data on sudden cardiac arrest to help us improve our management and detection. What we're going to do with the Vanguard grant is expand that to have the world's largest multi-source cardiac arrest registry, the first one that has a control arm of normative cases, and one that will really place us on an international platform in transforming our understanding of sudden cardiac arrest.
When I was asked to be involved with this campaign, there was a lot of discussion about hope and how we can bring hope. I didn't really understand how our story fits into that message of hope. But after thinking about it, I realized that it's not our story that brings the hope. The hope comes from all of us coming together to create a voice loud enough to make a difference. And we can prevent other families from growing up without their loved ones. Jack has been identified as having Brugada because of the screening that happened because of Bryan. I'd love to have been able to identify Bryan. I'd love to have not needed to have a sudden cardiac arrest in the family to be able to identify when a family is at risk of sudden cardiac arrests.
We couldn't be more grateful for the Heart Foundation's donors' support, and every dollar counts and adds up. We have great projects to fund. This is just so appreciated, your generosity in helping us to advance Australian research.